Dylan Sanders had just spent 10 minutes trying to grab a jar of almond butter from the top shelf when a deep voice behind her said, "Need a hand?" She turned fast, nearly knocking over a display of pasta, and came face to face with a tall man in a gray hoodie and jeans, a little boy with wild curls perched on his hip. The kid was chewing a granola bar and holding a tiny red race car. "Ah, yeah," Dylan said, blinking at the shelf, then back at him. "Apparently I'm vertically challenged today." He chuckled and reached up effortlessly, grabbing the jar and handing it to her. "Happens to the best of us." "Thanks," she said, tucking the jar into her basket. "And thanks to you too," she added, smiling at the boy. The kid gave her a sticky grin, then whispered something in the man's ear. The man laughed. "He says you look like a princess," he said. "I told him not everyone in a grocery store is royalty, but he's convinced." Dylan blinked, surprised, then laughed. "Well, he's very charming. And maybe a little psychic." The man shifted the boy to his other arm. "I'm Theo Hart, and this is Elias. He's 4, and full of opinions." "Dylan." "Nice to meet you both." They stood there a moment too long for it to be casual, and Dylan felt something warm settle in her chest. Theo looked tired in the way single parents do, dark circles, a little stubble, but his eyes were kind and his smile easy. She could tell just by watching how naturally he held Elias that he was a good dad. She started. "Yeah, of course, sorry, I didn't mean to hold you up," Theo said quickly, adjusting Elias again. "No, it's fine," Dylan said. "It was nice meeting you." She turned away, but not before catching Elias waving at her. She waved back, then forced herself to walk down the aisle like her heart wasn't suddenly beating louder. She shouldn't have been at a grocery store in the first place. Her assistant would have had everything delivered, but Dylan had insisted on spending the weekend alone. No staff, no drivers. Just a normal weekend in the city, like a normal person, whatever that meant. No one had recognized her so far, and she'd kept her low profile with jeans, a sweatshirt, and a baseball cap. And now she couldn't stop thinking about the man with the soft voice and the kid who thought she was a princess. 2 days later, Dylan was back at the same grocery store, even though she didn't need anything, just in case. And there he was. Theo stood by the frozen section, balancing Elias on his hip again, staring at a row of pizzas like they held the secrets to the universe. "Hey," she said before she could second-guess herself. Theo's head snapped up, and his whole face lit up. "Look who it is," he said to Elias. "It's the princess." Elias grinned and reached for her. "You just made his day," Theo said. "Actually, mine too." Dylan smiled. "Pizza night." "Every Friday," Theo said. "You're not stalking me, right?" "I might be," she said, "but only for the good snacks." Theo laughed, and it made something flutter low in her stomach. They ended up talking for 20 minutes about pizza toppings, Elias's obsession with dinosaurs, and Dylan's fake job at a marketing firm. She didn't lie very often, but people acted different when they knew who she was, what she was worth. And she liked how Theo looked at her like she was just a woman picking out frozen food. "I should go," she said finally, even though she didn't want to. Theo nodded but looked reluctant. "Hey," he said. "There's a park near here. Elias likes the swings. You want to come?" She hesitated. "I don't want to interrupt." "You're not. He likes you. And I wouldn't mind either." Dylan swallowed. "Okay. Sure." The park was small and quiet, tucked between buildings. Elias ran ahead, shouting something about a T-Rex. Theo sat beside her on the bench, close enough that their knees almost touched. "I'm glad we ran into each other again," he said. "Me too." He looked at her for a long moment. "You're not really just a marketing assistant, are you?" Panic shot through her. "Why would you say that?" He shrugged. "You just don't seem like someone who takes orders. You've got this. Presence." Dylan laughed. "Is that a compliment or a warning?" "Definitely a compliment." She looked at him, at the tired lines on his face and the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. "What do you do?" she asked. "Construction," he said. "I run my own crew. Mostly residential remodels." So he worked with his hands. Of course he did. "And Elias?" "His mom left when he was 2, Theo said, voice quiet. "She wanted a different life. I couldn't give her the one she wanted, I guess." "I'm sorry." He shook his head. "It worked out. I've got him. That's enough." Dylan didn't say anything, just watched Elias race across the grass. After that, they started seeing each other more. Coffee on Saturday mornings. Park visits. Walks around the city. Dylan kept the lies small, manageable. She said she lived in a rental apartment. She didn't mention the penthouse. She said she freelanced. She didn't mention the billion-dollar company she inherited from her late father. She told herself it wasn't a big deal. She just wanted to be known for who she was, not what she had. And Theo never asked for anything. He paid for their coffee, carried Elias's backpack, and sometimes gave her that look like he was falling for her and didn't know how to stop. One night after dinner at a tiny diner, Elias asleep in Theo's arms, he looked at her and said, "I don't know what this is between us, but it's getting hard to ignore." Her heart thudded. "I know. You scare me a little," he admitted. "You're just too good to be true." Dylan swallowed. "I'm not perfect, Theo." He looked at her, eyes steady. "Yeah, but you're real. That's what matters." She kissed him that night. It was soft and warm and changed everything. But she knew the truth was coming. And when it did, it was going to hurt. The first time Dylan stepped into Theo's apartment, she had to fight the instinct to reach for her phone and cancel it all. It was small, 2 bedrooms barely separated by thin walls, a living room that doubled as a dining area, and an aging kitchen with mismatched chairs. But it was clean, lived in, and full of warmth. Elias had covered the walls with crayon drawings and glow-in-the-dark stars that hadn't been stuck on straight. A stack of wooden blocks teetered in the corner, next to a plastic dinosaur with one leg missing. Theo ruffled his hair as he tossed his keys into a dented metal bowl by the door. "Sorry for the mess. We're not exactly house beautiful." "I like it," Dylan said carefully, setting down the grocery bag she insisted on bringing. "It feels like it gets hugged a lot in here." Theo turned, surprised by her phrasing. "That's actually the nicest thing anyone said about this place." "I mean it." He nodded toward the kitchen. "You still good with making spaghetti? I warned you Elias is picky about sauce." "Good thing I brought backup," she said, pulling out a jar she'd picked up from a specialty shop. "Imported. It's got basil, garlic, and something he won't be able to pronounce, but will secretly love." Theo leaned against the counter, watching her unwrap the jar. "You always do that." "Do what?" "Show up with exactly the right thing. Like you knew what we needed before we did." She looked at him, hands still. "Maybe I just pay attention." He gave her a look, then turned toward the stove. "You're something else, Dylan." They ended up sitting on the floor to eat after Elias decided the couch made a better pirate ship. Dylan didn't mind. She balanced her plate on her knees while Elias recited a story about treasure maps and sea monsters. Theo corrected him gently when he mixed up the ending. After Elias fell asleep on the couch mid-sentence, Theo carried him to bed. Dylan started to gather the dishes, but he returned before she could finish. "You don't have to clean up," he murmured, taking the plate from her hands. "I want to." He paused, and something in his features shifted. "Why are you really here?" Dylan blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I've been trying to figure you out. You don't talk about your family. You don't have social media. You never invite me over." She hesitated. "I told you I like keeping things simple." "I know," he said softly. "But simple doesn't mean invisible." She turned away, pretending to rinse a cup she'd already washed. "I like being around you. That's all that matters, right?" Theo stepped closer. "It matters more when I know who I'm letting in." Her chest tightened. "Are you saying you don't trust me?" "I'm saying I want to," he said. "But I've got a kid. I don't play around." "Neither do I," she thought. But the words caught in her throat. "I should go," she whispered. "It's late." He didn't stop her, but his eyes stayed on her all the way to the door. Outside, the night was colder than she expected. She pulled her coat tighter and walked 2 blocks before her driver pulled up in the black SUV she hadn't wanted Theo to see. She slid into the back seat, silent the whole ride to the penthouse she'd told him didn't exist. Upstairs, she kicked off her shoes and stared at the skyline through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city glittered like it was made of diamonds. But all she could think of was a worn carpet, a crooked star on a painted ceiling, and a man who looked at her like she was worth something even when he didn't know what that was. The lie grew heavier. The next morning, her assistant, Marcy, barged into the kitchen with a tablet in one hand and a latte in the other. "You've got 3 back-to-back meetings starting at 9. There's a call with the Singapore team at noon, and the gala committee wants to confirm your speech." Dylan stirred her coffee. "Cancel the last meeting. I'll do the call from home." Marcy frowned. "That's the acquisition meeting." "I know. You've been skipping a lot of these, Dylan. Are you okay?" She looked up. "Do I seem not okay?" Marcy hesitated. "You seem like someone who's somewhere else." Dylan didn't answer. She wasn't about to explain that her somewhere else was a man who built things with his hands and kissed her like she wasn't made of money. Later that night, she sat in silence at the gala committee meeting while voices argued over flower arrangements and chair placement. When someone asked about the guest list, she barely looked up. Keep it under 500. No press tables. But, Dylan, this is your father's legacy fundraiser. The press will do what they always do, she said, her voice flat. Take pictures, ask questions, and speculate. I want this year to be different. She left early. The next weekend, she showed up at Theo's again without warning. He opened the door with flour on his shirt and a confused look on his face. Hey, he said. You okay? She nodded, then looked past him. Where's Elias? Neighbors, he said slowly. They're doing a movie night. What? Without answering, she stepped inside and handed him a folded piece of paper. He opened it, brow furrowing. What's this? An invitation. He read it twice. You want me to come to a fundraiser? I want you to come with me, she said. As my guest. He stared at her. This is at the Astoria Grand. I know. This kind of thing's not really my scene, Dylan. I'll be there, she said. Bring Elias if you want. There's a kid's table with a magician. He looked at her, searching her face. Why does this feel like a test? Because it is, she said quietly. He folded the paper and set it on the counter. I don't need to be tested, Dylan. I just need the truth. I'm trying, she said. Just come. Please. He didn't say yes. But he didn't say no either. And that was the closest thing to hope she'd had in days. She left before she could say too much. Back at her penthouse, she stood in the middle of her closet, staring at gowns lined up like museum pieces. She'd worn them all before to galas, premieres, charity auctions. They all fit. None of them felt right. She picked one anyway. Gold silk. No green. Nothing soft. Nothing safe. This time, she wasn't hiding. The Astoria Grand shimmered beneath 1,000 crystal lights, every inch of it glowing with opulence. Gilded columns, velvet-lined staircases, and a string quartet playing near the marble fountain in the atrium set the tone. Dylan stood at the top of the grand staircase, heart pounding beneath layers of gold silk, scanning the crowd below for one face. Theo's. She hadn't heard from him in 4 days. No calls. No chance encounters. No Elias tugging at her hand with a new dinosaur fact. It was a silence that pressed in on her tighter than the fitted gown she'd chosen. Her assistant approached quietly. Guests are arriving at a steady pace. The press has been kept outside like you requested. Dylan nodded without turning. The kids section? Set up in the East Ballroom. The magician's running late, but the face painter's already drawing unicorns. She exhaled and gave a tight nod. Thanks, Marcy. She descended slowly, every step echoing against marble and heels that had never felt so loud. People turned. Heads tilted. This was her world. She'd grown up in it. But tonight, it felt foreign. Like she didn't belong in her own life. At the bottom of the staircase, a waiter offered champagne. She took a glass, barely tasted it. Dylan. She turned fast. Theo stood just inside the entrance, wearing a navy suit that didn't fit perfectly but made her breath catch anyway. Elias stood beside him in a tiny vest and clip-on tie, his hair combed with effort but still sticking up in the back. I wasn't sure you'd come, she said, setting the glass aside. Neither was I, he replied. But Elias wanted to see the magician. I told him he might be disappointed. I'm glad you're here. He looked around, taking in the chandeliers and the guests in black tie. You really undersold this thing. She hesitated. This is my real life, Theo. Yeah, he said. I figured that out when someone at the coat check called you Ms. Rothschild. She winced. I was going to tell you. When, he asked. When I showed up to your non-existent apartment and found out you own half the city? You know that's not what matters to me. Then why hide it? She opened her mouth, then closed it. Elias tugged Theo's hand. Can I go see the animals? He asked, pointing toward the east wing where a petting zoo had been set up inside a glass atrium. Theo crouched in front of him. Stay where the grown-ups can see you, okay? Elias nodded and trotted off, leaving them in the middle of the crowd. I kept the truth from you because I didn't want this, she said, gesturing around. All this noise. I wanted you to see me without the name, without the legacy. He folded his arms. You think I wouldn't have? I didn't know. That's the problem, he said. You decided for me. She stepped closer. I didn't expect to fall for you. His jaw tightened. You think that makes this easier? No. But I'm still here. And I brought you into this tonight because I wanted you to see the parts of me I've never shared with anyone. He looked at the crowd again. They're watching you like you're the queen of something. I don't care about them. You should. You're leading them. She blinked, caught off guard. What? You're not pretending to be someone anymore. You're standing here owning it. That's the woman I want to know. Her breath hitched. Then let me show you. He hesitated. One night doesn't fix what you broke. I know, but it's a start. She reached for his hand, and he didn't pull away. They spent the next hour introducing Elias to a baby goat named Tony and a balloon artist who made him a triceratops. Theo kept glancing over at Dylan like he was trying to reconcile everything he'd once known with what he was seeing now. Eventually, dinner began. Dylan was seated at the head table, but she didn't stay long. She stood to make her speech, and when the microphone clicked on, the room stilled. I grew up watching my father build this foundation, she began. He believed in creating safety nets for people who'd fallen through the cracks. Tonight, I'm proud to carry on that work. She paused, scanning the crowd until her eyes landed on Theo, seated at a table near the back with Elias beside him, legs swinging. But I want to tell you something I've never said in a speech before, she continued. We all wear masks. We all hide parts of ourselves because we're afraid people won't love the truth. I did that. And I nearly lost something irreplaceable because of it. The room was silent. I'm not perfect, but I'm trying to be honest. And I hope that counts for something. She stepped down before the applause could start and made her way back to Theo, heels clicking against polished wood. He stood when she reached him. You meant that, he said quietly. I meant all of it. Elias yawned, leaning against his father's side. I should get him home, Theo said. Let me call a car, Dylan offered. Theo nodded. You coming with us? If you'll have me. He gave her a long look. Let's find out. They left through a private entrance, Dylan's hand resting lightly on Elias's shoulder as he sleepily chattered about goats and glitter paint. When Theo opened the car door, Dylan hesitated before sliding in beside them. No more masks. No more pretending. For the first time in her life, she wasn't running from what she was. She was running toward it. Theo stood in the quiet of Dylan's penthouse kitchen, his hand curved around a mug of coffee he hadn't touched. The sun had barely begun to filter in through the towering windows, casting long shadows across the sleek stone counters. Elias was still asleep in the guest bedroom, curled under a blanket Dylan had picked out herself the night before. Not because it matched the room, but because she said it looked like something a kid would find comforting. He hadn't said much when she invited them to stay, but he hadn't refused either. Dylan stepped in barefoot, her hair pulled back, wearing an oversized hoodie that didn't belong to her and likely cost more than his rent. She moved quietly, like she knew that despite the silence, something was still shifting between them. You didn't sleep, she said, her voice low. He didn't look at her. Didn't want to. You're thinking. Trying not to. She leaned against the counter across from him, her arms folded. You could ask me anything right now. He studied the steam curling from his mug. Why didn't you ever tell me what you really do? I was afraid you'd stop looking at me like I was someone you could trust. Too late for that. She flinched, then straightened. I deserve that. He finally met her eyes. I don't care about the money. I care that you thought I couldn't handle the truth. You were never the problem, she said. I was. He set the mug down. You said you wanted me to see who you are, but you keep showing me who you think I want. I've never had someone stay, she said quietly. Not because they didn't want to. Because I never let them. I thought if I kept everything under control, I wouldn't have to risk being hurt. You don't control anything with me. I know, she said. That's what terrifies me. He let that sit in the air for a long moment. Do you want this to work, Dylan? Yes. Then let me see where you fall apart. Not just where you shine. Her throat tightened. I'm trying. Then don't stop. Later that afternoon, Dylan drove them across the city in a vintage convertible she hadn't touched in years. Elias sat in the back seat, pointing at everything like it was the first time he'd seen it. When they reached the construction site Theo had been overseeing on the weekends, he hesitated before getting out. Why here? He asked. Because you've seen where I live, she said. I want to see where you build. He unlocked the gate and led them inside. The skeleton of the new home stood tall against the sky, all open beams and fresh timber. It smelled like sawdust and ambition. This one's for a family, he said. 3 kids. They wanted an open kitchen so everyone could be in the same room during dinner. Dylan stepped over a pile of stacked planks and looked up. It's beautiful. It's not finished. Neither am I. He glanced at her, then at Elias, who was pretending to hammer a nail into a 2x4. You really think you can fit into this kind of life? I don't want to fit into it, she said. I want to be part of it. He leaned against a support beam. You're not exactly the part of it type. I can learn. Elias ran up, waving a tape measure. Can we build a treehouse? Theo knelt beside him. We can try. Dylan crouched down next to them. I'll help. Theo raised a brow. You know how to use a drill? I can write a check for one, she said. But I'd rather you teach me. That night, she cooked. Badly. Theo watched her burn the garlic, misjudge the pasta water, and forget the salad entirely. But she laughed through it, and when Elias declared the lumpy noodles the best thing he'd ever tasted, Theo couldn't help the warmth that twisted in his chest. After Elias fell asleep with a dinosaur tucked under each arm, Dylan walked out to the balcony where Theo stood looking out over the lights. I can't undo the way I started this, she said. But I can choose how it ends. He turned toward her. What does that mean? I want to give you what my father gave me. Security. Opportunity. Not because I think you need saving. Because I want to build this with you. I don't want your money. I know, she said. That's why I trust you with all of it. He stepped closer. I don't need you to fix anything, Dylan. Just stay. I'm not going anywhere. He cupped her face, his voice low. You make me feel like the ground under my feet finally stopped shifting. She leaned in, her forehead touching his. You make me feel like I don't have to be alone in a crowd. He kissed her, slow and certain. Weeks passed. Dylan didn't hire a driver again. She took Elias to school when Theo had early sight meetings. Theo helped her draft speeches for the foundation, even if he grumbled about public speaking. Elias started calling the penthouse the big house, and it became less of a fortress and more of a home. They didn't blend their lives perfectly. There were arguments, mismatched schedules, a dinner party where Theo wore boots that scuffed the imported rug and Dylan couldn't stop laughing. But it worked, because they chose each other. Every day. One rainy afternoon, Theo led her outside to the edge of a construction site they were now designing together. He handed her a rolled set of blueprints and waited. This is our house, he said. If you want it. She blinked down at the plans. There was an open kitchen, a treehouse in the back, and a room bigger than the master labeled Eli's Future Arcade. I want it, she said. With you. He pulled a simple ring from his pocket. No diamonds. No fanfare. Just a promise. Then marry me. She didn't hesitate. Yes. They didn't throw a grand wedding. They got married in the garden of the new house before it was finished, with Elias tossing flower petals and licking icing off the cake before anyone else could have a piece. There were no headlines, no press releases. Just love. And for the first time in her life, Dylan didn't have to reach for anything. It had already been placed right into her hands. The house was almost finished by early spring. Not the penthouse, the real house. The one with the wraparound porch and the cedar shutters Dylan had insisted on, even though they didn't match anything else in the neighborhood. Theo had argued, but when she showed him a sketch Elias had drawn of a castle with wooden windows, he'd relented with a reluctant nod and a quiet. Then we're building a castle. Now, Dylan stood in the middle of the sunroom, barefoot on the newly installed hardwood, watching painters touch up the window trim. The glass stretched from floor to ceiling, overlooking the quiet, tree-lined backyard. She could already imagine Elias building forts out of couch cushions in this very room. She could already see Theo sitting with a coffee, reading the paper like he did when he wanted 10 minutes of peace but never got more than 5. Marcy walked in with blueprints tucked under her arm. She was wearing flats instead of heels and had her sleeves rolled up. Dylan couldn't remember the last time she'd seen her assistant in anything less than full business armor. I just came from the site manager, Marcy said. The kitchen backsplash came in early. They'll install it tomorrow. Dylan nodded, still watching the sunlight stretch across the floor. And the garden? They're laying the stone path this afternoon. You'll be able to plant by next week. Good. Elias wants strawberries. Marcy tilted her head. You don't even like strawberries. I don't, Dylan said, smiling softly. But he does. Marcy studied her for a moment. You've changed. I've come home. Theo walked in then, dusty from the work site, his shirt damp from the sun, a measuring tape clipped to his belt. He took one look at Dylan and grinned, not the kind of grin meant for anyone else, but the one reserved just for her. Back wall's set, he said. And the treehouse platform's up. Elias wants a drawbridge. He's 6, Dylan said. He thinks we're building a fortress. Theo pulled her into a kiss that tasted like sawdust and sweat and something sweeter underneath. Maybe we are. That night, the three of them curled up on the porch swing Theo had installed himself. Elias had fallen asleep between them, his head on Dylan's lap, his legs across Theo's. The breeze was warm, the sky streaked with stars, and for the first time in her life, Dylan didn't feel the need to fill the silence. Theo brushed his fingers over her wrist. You still thinking about that job offer? She sighed. Singapore would be a 5-year commitment, and I'd be running a corporate expansion that doesn't even need me. You'd be great at it. I'd be gone too much. Theo didn't argue. He didn't have to. I told the board I'm not going, she said. Marcy's taking the lead on the project. I'll consult, but remotely. He looked at her, that quiet pride in his eyes. You're sure? I'm sure. I never asked you to stay. You didn't have to. The next day, they finished painting the nursery. Not because they were expecting, but because Elias had declared it unfair that the baby didn't have a room, yet even though there wasn't a baby. Yet, we don't even know if we want another kid, Dylan had said, laughing as she dipped her brush into the pale yellow paint. We have time, Theo had replied, stepping behind her and kissing the back of her neck. But I'll build the crib anyway, just in case. By summer, the house was alive. Elias had made friends with every neighbor within 3 blocks. Dylan had learned to cook 3 meals without setting off the smoke alarm. Theo spent his evenings on the porch with blueprints spread over his lap, and Dylan sat beside him with a glass of wine, reading notes for the Foundation's latest literacy initiative. One night, after Elias had gone to bed and the cicadas hummed softly in the trees, Theo turned to her. Did you ever think your life would look like this? No, she said truthfully. I thought I'd end up alone. Comfortable. Powerful. But alone. He nodded. Me too. She reached for his hand. But we're not. No, he said. We're not. They had their wedding ceremony in the backyard that fall. Not a second wedding, just the real one. The one that felt like them. Theo wore a dark navy suit. Dylan wore a linen dress that fluttered around her ankles. Elias was the ring bearer, though he lost the ring twice, and then cried when he found it because it was too shiny to give away. Theo's vows were simple. I promise to keep choosing you. Even when it's hard. Even when the world gets loud. You're my quiet. Dylan's voice trembled when she answered. I've had a lot of things in this life, but none of them ever held me like your hand in mine. I didn't know love could be this easy. Or this strong. They kissed as leaves drifted around them, and the guests cheered. Elias screamed, kiss again, and they did. After the guests had gone and the lanterns burned low, Dylan and Theo danced barefoot on the grass, the music barely audible from the house. I never thought I'd get married in a backyard, Dylan whispered. I never thought I'd marry a CEO who can't make pancakes. She laughed, pressing her forehead to his. But you did. I did. Years passed. The house grew fuller. A baby girl arrived 2 years later, with Dylan's eyes and Theo's stubborn chin. Elias taught her to walk by leading her along the porch railing, one cautious step at a time. Dylan's foundation expanded globally. She traveled occasionally, but never missed a birthday or a school play. Theo took on fewer projects, choosing instead to mentor young builders and spend mornings making waffles shaped like dinosaurs. They still fought sometimes. Over laundry. Over bedtime routines. Over whether or not the living room needed another bookshelf. But they always found their way back to each other. One evening, as the kids ran barefoot through the yard chasing fireflies, Dylan sat beside Theo on the porch swing, her head resting on his shoulder. This life, she said softly. It's everything I didn't know I needed. He kissed the top of her head. It's everything I didn't dare hope for. And in that golden hour, surrounded by laughter and footsteps and the smell of cut grass, they held on to the life they built, a life full of truth, trust, and the kind of love that didn't need to be grand to be forever. Because forever, for them, had already begun.